Hey, the black statue, it's really beautiful,
Feels good to see my colleagues and my teachers in the same place.
Just to say, it's good to see familiar and loved faces after a while. Hi, Dr. Niazapa.
So Razia Sultana Khan is a fiction writer. She's a poet and an artist. In fact, the sunflowers behind her are drawn by her. She earned her MA in Linguistics from the University of York in the UK and her PhD in creative writing from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. At present, she is an advisor and professor of English at Independent University, Bangladesh. Her stories explore conventions, oppressions, folklore, symbols, and mindsets through cultural, temporal, and sociological lenses, as we will find out tonight. And the multidimensional characters she created in these stories represent how women struggle against patriarchy in each era. So you can see how it resonates with what HerStory Foundation does.
And thank the sister library and the Goethe-Institut. As you see, I was terribly excited because this book hasn't just come out; it's been there for a while. But it's wonderful when people want to read it and discuss it, because I do feel there's a lot there that we could talk about as women. And I've been asked, why do I write about beggars and housewives and poor women and not about, mountain climbing and stuff like that? The point is, there's so many stories here. These are the stories I keep hearing from the domestic worker, from the rickshaw driver, from my cousins. So I just feel that, if I can, I don't want to take the voice of other people, but I do feel that these stories need to be told. And my grandmother and my mother, both were great storytellers, but they never had a chance to put it in writing. They just passed on the stories. And I'm blessed in that, I can write. So I thought, here, give them a voice. And that's what I do. I try to do. So your topic is labor. Now, none of my stories are really about work per se. But having said that, all of them do have women's work, which is, never really paid, but it's work. I see it as work. And in all the stories, we have sections where the women are working in different ways. Sometimes they're given work to keep them occupied. Sometimes they're given work in the middle of the night. The husband comes home with a fish. What do? You can't say, I'm sorry, I've clocked out. It's after 6. No, you get up and do your things. So this woman is there cooking in the middle of the night and having these paranormal, whatever experiences. So I feel my stories are relatively simple, but, people relate to them in different ways. So actually, Halima was my grandmother's name. And this story was inspired by her because I was very young. She said one day, we were talking about tea. My mother is rather addicted to her 5 o'clock tea. And my grandmother said, during the British time, we used to get free tea. And we said, no way, Grandma, nobody gives anything free, not the Brits anyway. And she said, no, we used to get free tea. And then, sort of that sentence stayed in my head. And a long time later, as I was, when I studied and all that, I looked into it. And yes, it was true. And the reason, I don't know if people know about this, and I'll just take a minute. The reason was that the British had, in Darjeeling and in the north, they had this tea cultivation. And they were sending the tea to Britain. But they realized they had a huge market in the local population. But the local population didn't drink tea. They drank milk, they drank water, milk, almond water. So what to do? They had to create the market. And they created the market, a bit like opium in China, I suppose. They created the market by giving free tea to the local people at a certain time every day. And they did it for a certain time. And some people got hooked. And then when they put a price to it, they paid it. It's like, okay, we've been having tea for the last month. Let's pay a few paisa to get tea. And that's how they hooked the whole subcontinent. It's not, the majority of us don't drink coffee. We still drink tea. Tea is the preferred beverage. So this Seduction, the title actually, the titular story, it's not just a seduction of this girl to the tea seller, but I felt it was seduction of the whole country by the British, by giving something free and seducing us. So we just had our eyes closed, not tea, but in other ways as well, while they just came and took the whole country. And we were there having our paratha and kebab and enjoying the weather and whatnot, while they just walked in and took the country. So for me, this story is quite a meaningful one. And I'd like to read the bit from, like, Halima doesn't do any work per se, but she's given work to occupy her so that she doesn't do anything naughty or inappropriate in the middle of the day. And I think many mothers-in-law and guardians do that even now with young girls, because in the middle of the day they have this like siesta, and they're lying down and resting, and the young girls are out there, roaming around and doing God knows what. So to keep them in check, they're given some work. In the story Cinderella, she was given, lentils and whatever to sit down and separate. So here, Halima is given some embroidery. I'll just read a short passage. If you have the book, it's on page 17. There were afternoons which offered Halima a visual feast, from horse-drawn tangas, squeezing through to a grey moving wall, lumbering past with the rope-like tail switching this way and that, warding off the swarm of flies attracted to it. One day, a snake charmer passed, the undulating notes of his bamboo flute coiling and uncoiling around him. Another day, the bioscope man passed with his box on wheels of exotic pictures waiting to be viewed through a peephole. And I don't know how many of you, probably most of you would not, perhaps Niazapa remembers, but they would go around, and chant like, Dekho, dekho, Agra ka Taj Mahal dekho, Qutub Minar dekho. Come and see all these wonders. And he would chant them, and he would have a little bell, and you could look into that peephole and actually see pictures. And it just cost very little. So this girl is entranced by that. On such days, Halima's eyes sparkled and her muscles rippled with excitement as she tilted the slats for a better view. She sat entranced to think such places existed, and only for the price of 1 paisa. That's how her mother-in-law found her one day, eyes glued to the world outside, oblivious to the sounds inside. The older woman gently adjusted the slats and said, "It works both ways, When you look out, they look in." The following day, before going for her midday nap, she brought Halima a piece of white cotton, a pair of hoops, and yellow and green skeins of embroidery thread. "Your mother said you're very good with the needle and thread." Halima's mother-in-law smiled. Halima lowered her eyes and nodded, her face glowing at the compliment. "Well, would you like to do this embroidery? We can frame it and put it on the wall in your room when you're done. Would you like that?" Halima accepted the objects and nodded again. The piece of cotton had an outline of a parrot with a large envelope in its beak penciled on it. On the envelope, in uneven letters, were the words, "Forget-me-not." Every afternoon after that, she sat with the embroidery, running her needle in and out of the material, taking small and even stitches. When her mother had first shown her the basic stitches, she'd said, "Stitches are like women's steps, small and neat, careful but steady, keeping within its space, not crossing boundaries." That's what Halima tried to do, take small stitches, keep within the boundary. But when she stopped and looked at her work, she noticed that some stitches had crossed the penciled outline. The colors, too, were limiting, yellow and green. Just a bit of red would have made such a difference to the beak. I think I'll stop there. If anybody has a question or would like to continue, please go.
Did you, growing up, were you given similar advice?
I actually didn't live in Bangladesh growing up. And yes, teachers and all, this boundary, keep to the boundary. Don't laugh too loud. Laughter shouldn't be heard outside the room. That I remember my mother telling me all the time. Because, you forget and you laugh, and she'd say, a girl's laughter voice should not be heard outside the room. So then you learn to go, you sort of giggle, and you're not yourself. You're not your natural self. So in different ways, yes, but not like, being given embroidery to keep me busy, because I had school and I had assignments. So that kept me busy.
Yeah, this is a slightly aside, but what Razia said reminded me. I studied at Holy Cross, which is a Bangla medium school, and we had a teacher for religious studies, and he was very, the 50 girls in his class, and he really had a difficult time with us. But one of the things that sort of remains with me, he used to get so angry when we laughed, and we laughed a lot, but he used to get so angry when we laughed. He would say, girls' teeth should not be seen, and it wasn't long enough ago to be acceptable, if you understand what I'm saying. So so I think those things in different forms, they remain. I never heard anything like that at home or in my friends' homes, but I certainly heard it from him at school.
I'm reading from Palki. Hunched in the confines of the heavy Banarasi shari, Kokila squirmed as a drop of sweat trickled down her temple, past her chin to form a rivulet at her cleavage. The dampness of her blouse increased. She hoped the sandalwood decoration around her eyes would not smear. How do you pronounce this?
In the melange?
In the melange of voices around her, she picked up a line of conversation. So, what did you think of the food? The suggestion in the gruff masculine voice did not invite a positive response. I thought they were a bit heavy handed with the ghee. You know, they do that in the city. It makes the curry so rich you can't eat more than one or two. Contrary to the comment, the voice suggested a relaxed and satiated state. Kokila felt her skin turn even warmer, grateful for once that the shari covered her completely. Her head dropped a little lower. Perhaps they weren't aware that she could hear them, or perhaps they just didn't care. Was this what her mother had meant when she had warned her? Kokila was on her way to Chatpur, her husband's village, for the first time. From her parents' house in the posh section of Dhaka, they traveled by car to the launch terminal in Shodorghat and then taken the 6-hour trip to the ferryghat in Chatpur. The journey had been a boring one, during which she had sat in her elaborate shari on exhibition. She took the baby steps befitting a beau, making the trip even longer, surrounded by people ready to cater to her every whim as long as she did not have any. Kokila remembered when Aunt Zohra, her youngest aunt on her father's side, had gotten married to Uncle Zishan, their next door neighbor. It had taken Zohra a full 15 minutes to cross the courtyards between the two doors, and everyone had marveled how gracefully she did it. Her own family more so, considering how swiftly she managed to flit between the houses before the wedding. Kokila, then 13, had invited her aunt the beautiful clothes, the attention, and not least the handsome groom who had laughed and joked with everyone around him. That was 2 years ago, and now her head bent under the bridal veil, which allowed her to see only a couple of steps in front of her. Kokila felt a sympathetic gush of understanding for what her aunt had gone through. Tall and slim, Zohra had been a model for Kokila. Zohra, with her stretched and pressed pale cotton sharis, each fold exactly in place, always looked as if she had stepped out of an issue of Begum magazine. But things had changed. Zohra had turned up at the wedding in a dark synthetic shari with her two daughters clinging to her achul. Kokila had noticed the limp brows and the smear of kajal in Zohra's eyes. After giving Kokila a warm hug, she had drifted off with the baby, her drooping back looking forlorn and lost. Should I stop here or should I go on?
Maybe let's stop a little bit and reflect.
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Razia, what inspired you to write this one?
When I went, okay, this is all the sort of like, I'm letting out the family secrets. When I got married, I was taken by Palki. Yeah, I don't know. Somebody got into the head that, it would be great to have the bride come in a Palki. And the Palki had not been used for a long time. And actually what happened in the story did happen slightly, that, it was being used by chickens. So there were the smell of chicken shit and feathers and whatnot. And I had a horrible experience. I was so claustrophobic. I've never forgotten that episode. So this is a result of that. I thought, make the most of it, use that experience and produce something from it, something positive. So it's a personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
But that episode of the Palki, the ride, and what happened, that part. And bits and pieces, yes, they're always cousins who aspire. There are kids who think that getting married, that's the big thing in their lives. They're going to get all these perfumes and dresses and travel and freedom. And some kids do have that sort of, maybe they're brought up that way to think, this is all a woman's life. So, yeah, maybe I put that, I made one of the characters feel that way.
I'll read a bit from The Good Wife. At the beginning, the reader doesn't know why the woman is sharpening the knife, but there are little hints from the very beginning that the knife is not being used, is being sharpened for something bad. So we do have those little hints, but it's a very short story, and the reader has to use a lot of imagination to understand what is happening. And I really like the ending because, there is, I just think that the man for whom the knife has been sharpened will come and find that there is no one to use the knife on. And I'll read a few lines. I think we have about 5 minutes, perhaps. The Good Wife. Shokina sharpens a large knife on the stone shield, which she uses for grinding spices. A diffused garlic and cumin smell oozes out, envelops her like a fragrant cloud. She squats on the floor, right arm moving forward, then back, forward and back, whir, whir, whir. Shokina's rust-colored cotton sari covers her from head to ankle, but can't hide her delicate, almost fragile figure. Not a single hair is visible within the twisted archel of the sari. Only when she raises her wrist and relieves an itch does she disclose the white scar running down her hairline to the top of her right brow like a frozen lightning bolt. A red glass bangle on each wrist glitters, bands of blood, fresh over the pale scars, crisscrossing her arms. She spatters some spittle on her forefinger and tests the edge of the knife. Satisfied it is sharp, she lumbers up and places it on a low wooden platform the size of a single bed which blocks one end of the veranda. I'm leaving a couple of paragraphs. There's a description of the knives laid out. There are, neatly, sort of like scraped, peeled sticks laid out on the bed. She has kept the food warm for her husband. I'm leaving a few lines. I'm going to the next page. She looks toward her kitchen, where everything is in pristine condition. The aluminum pots of boiled rice and vegetable curry on dying embers, keeping warm for the return of her husband. Her eyes scan the small yard. 6 clothespins hang forlornly the clothesline. Nothing moves. The western sky is vibrant with the multicolored ribbons formed by the setting sun, and a spark flickers in her eyes before she remembers that the setting sun also heralds the arrival of her husband. Shokina's mother's parting words ring in her ears. A good wife makes sure her husband is happy with her at all times and is never in need of anything that is in her power to give. If he is not happy with her, she provides him with the tools to express this unhappiness. The good wife's reward is in the afterlife. I will stop there because Shokina does not wait for the reward in her afterlife.
Please continue.
You want me to continue? Okay. Shokina's eyes turn to the main gate, the only opening in the high protective wall that runs around the little house. Rose bushes stand like sentries on either side of the gate, the imbalance unavoidable. On one side, a profusion of dark green leaves contrasts merrily with the red of the roses, while on the other side is the caricature of a drooping plant, stunted and shriveled, with one bud craning to bloom, to move away from its roots. I'm leaving a paragraph. Her husband had come in early the day before and found her with Dhala, the black cat, curled up in her lap. He said nothing, but as he turned away, she caught the fragment of a curled lip and jolted up. Dhala gave a meow of protest at being so unceremoniously dropped, but slithered away. That was the last time she saw Dhala. Shokina picks up the bundle in which she has 2 saris and blouses, a pair of slippers and a comb, the remnants of the dowry she had brought with her. She nips the rosebud on her way out and pushes the blossom into a bun. The creaking of the door as it moves back and forth on its hinges follows her as she walks away. Thank you so much, Razia, for this very moving story.
Thank you for reading.
Please.
Thank you for reading it so well. Very well read.
What I really liked, not one of the things that caught me up is how a black cat is named Dhala.
Yeah.
Because Dhala means white in Bangla, So
Right.
Dhala the black cat.
Yeah.
So
it's like it's gonna pour, it's gonna rain, and then you're expecting something awful to happen, and then the relief of the last paragraph, I'm really grateful for. And it also reminded me of two proverbs that I think one is Serbian. Actually, I think both are Serbian. One is beat your wife often. If you don't know why, she does. Which is comical and just devastating. And the other one is a woman is made for a short walk in life from the bedroom to the kitchen. And it's it is this ownership, this idea of ownership, this idea that you can put bangles or a ring on a person and then do whatever to them. It is so prevalent. And I think reading from your stories, it also made me, because we grow such a thick skin here in Dhaka. We were confronted with poverty all the time, with hardship all the time. It's outside our windows. We brush against it on the street. And a lot of the time, I mean, I catch myself not thinking really about like where these people are coming from or like what their stories were. And your story, Alms, that really brought in me to think about like what is the backstory of these people, like what does river erosion do out there that brings people here to us. And likewise here, just the way that you're able to create these characters so in such a real way. I really admire that. So thank you.
You know, if I may speak, very often we see people and we judge them as we see them then. And we forget that this old guy who's not able to walk, whose shirt is maybe dirty and loose, used to be a very important person in his time. We forget that. We forget to see his past and just judge that person. And I think we're very quick in our judgment of beggars and prostitutes, She's a prostitute. She's a bad woman. We don't know the backstory. We don't know what made her that, how she came to be, how we would have been if we had been in that situation. So with Kanta, that is the thing. She's a beggar now. And, they say beggars are very as light as feathers. And she's really not a person, she's just a beggar. She comes, begs, takes a thing. But she was somebody in her time, She was a mother, she was a wife, she was a landlady. It was very different. And some people who read the story have told me, but she's such a devious character. At the end, she's so devious. She's not a good person. How can we judge her? She has a life to lead. So much has happened to her. And I just wanted to put a character who was sort of more real than someone who was like a good character, I mean, this happened to her. And now this is how she is, And we become like that sometimes. We may become like that if we were under the same pressure. Who knows? We don't know. We're not walking in the same shoes. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And Dr. Niaz, did you want to say something about why this story resonated so much with you and why you picked it?
This one, because you see, we are used to hearing stories about women being victimized, being, tortured, and women, accept it. They internalize it. As you said, if the man does not know why he's beating the wife, the woman knows it. So, they accept it and they allow themselves to be beaten. And and of course, many women don't have any alternatives. They remain. And then some women, of course, have done terrible things. They have killed their husbands. They have murdered their husbands. And I think there are famous real stories about women who have been tortured by their husbands, who have finally just exploded and, murdered their husbands when they were asleep. Now, what I like about this story is, at the beginning, you have this woman sharpening the knife for her husband, and you have the scene of her doing everything to make all those tools of oppression available to him. She even cooks for him. She does that. She remembers what her mother had said. But do we always listen to our mothers? Should we always listen to our mothers? Mothers say these things, but should we listen to them? Now, up to that point, Shukina does everything. But the killing of the cat, and that is very interesting. We are not told that the cat is killed, but she doesn't see the cat again. But the killing of the cat is the last straw. And this is something that, Rizia Rahman also has a story in which the wife is oppressed, and the husband, he doesn't only, torture his wife, he also tortures the birds and the cats that his wife is so fond of. But just in one line, there's such economy here. That is what I really appreciate. Such economy. We're just told that, she's sitting with the cat, petting the cat, and of course, as someone pointed out, the black cat is called Dhala, which means white. And then the husband doesn't like her petting the cat. And here's something, why is she wasting her time loving the cat? Why? I should be the center of her life. And, she's so startled, she drops the cat, and he doesn't do anything immediately. We do not know what he does to the cat, but the cat is never seen again. And the connection is not made in the story. We have to make the connection. That has been the last straw. The disappearance of the cat, the death of the cat has made this woman so obedient, has made her rebel. And at the end, I think this image of her, she's very poor. She has 2 saris, 2 blouses, a pair of slippers and a comb. She puts them down. But what she does is she plucks a rose and puts it in her hair. And what does that mean? There's no reason. There is no explanation. She puts into her hair, and we can feel that when she leaves the house, she leaves the house with jaunty steps. There is another story that Razia has written, Sunset, where a woman leaves, a middle-class woman leaves her husband, and that one ends, on a much more despondent note. She's sitting there in the park alone with her suitcase, not knowing where she is going to go. Shukina doesn't know where she is going, it is true, but she has a rose in her hair. And that, the world is in front of her. The world might not really be in front of her. Terrible things might happen to her and will happen to her. But at that moment, she is free and happy. That she has broken the chains that have bound her to this man who does not appreciate her for the woman that she is. So thank you, Razia, for this story. And thank you, Katerina. And I will have to leave now in a few minutes. So I will say my goodbyes. And I look forward to other sessions like this. I will slip away quietly.
Thank you, Nazapa. You've done a beautiful analysis. Really, it's just the whole thing is coming back to me. Thank you so much. Beautifully analyzed.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you again in the sister library. The rose that's trying to get away from its roots finally does.
Exactly.
I was also reflecting on there's this feeling, especially at the beginning, of sadomasochism, and it made me think of what's the difference between and it's consent, when when it's done in an environment where both people are doing it for whatever reasons that they're doing it, but they're both consenting, versus this where it's one person who's trapped and locked in something that they don't know how to leave, and they're just receiving the violence. The difference is huge.
But also, isn't it, even when one person seems to be consenting, are they really, or is it to make the partner happy, or for some financial gain? You wonder about the real reasons for their acquiescing to it, acquiescing to it. Yeah.
Consent is so complex.
Exactly.
After her marriage, Shati had tried to keep up her one passion, but their one-bed apartment did not allow for much space. She worked in the living room, but the bother of putting everything away after each painting session was too much. One day, she had left her stuff in a corner of the room, meaning to work on it the next day, and while Shomrat had not said anything, he had made a point of sitting outside on the balcony that evening. After that, she made sure she put everything away well before he got home. Shati's parents had given her a good education, but the protective boundary around her had been quite solid. They had wanted her to get a degree which would ensure a good marriage. What she studied did not matter. They had been quite happy with their choice of a son. Shomrat was a junior executive in a bank and expected to move up fast. He was good looking and could be charming when he chose to be. Both her parents had fallen for him. So I end by reading here because I think these two paragraphs, they encapsulate so much of what Bangladeshi women, even today, have to go through when they are of a so-called marriageable age. So the girl is told her her to-be husband, or her husband, who needs to be always be satisfied with how she was raised or how she is as a person, just as we read in The Good Wife. The wife is always told that she should do whatever she can, and whatever means she has at her disposal should be used to make sure that her husband or her husband-to-be is happy. So, and the husband, he doesn't show, just like in the previous story we read, the husband doesn't always need to actively participate in doing anything to let the woman know that he doesn't like her. He uses these certain ways to prove that he doesn't. Yeah, I think that's why I decided to choose this paragraph, because I don't know, it resonated very much with me, because I get to hear this so much. Maybe our parents, they learned it a certain way. So generational teachings that they have that have been imbibed in them, and now they are unlearning some stuff. But these are things that that get endorsed in the name of tradition. So I don't know. I found this very meaningful. Okay, I'll end it here.
What role does the supernatural have in your life? Did you experience it a lot, or is it a symbol for something else?
Yeah. I haven't experienced it, but people close to me claim to have. And in my family, from my mother's side, I actually had a grandfather who had two jinns as a pet. Now, we laughed at it when we heard, and even now I'm like, but jinns do exist, in the sense they're in the Quran. So if you believe in jinns. So that's another angle. But so many Bangladeshis, especially women, do believe in jinns and bhoots, and ghosts. And ghosts, I don't know. I think there is a whole paranormal area that we don't know about. It exists. And, like in the string theory, it's explained that, it's like a loaf of bread. You have this bread slices. So this side can't see what's happening here, though it's so close. And it's only when there's a warp that you experience. And ESP, extrasensory perception, I think there's something there that science hasn't gone into yet. And I don't know. My mind is open. Not about, blue, the black thing, like evil. Yeah, evil spirit. I don't know. As I'm talking, I'm like, I'm saying I don't believe. I don't think I believe in superstition, but I do believe there is some paranormal thing that science hasn't discovered or laid bare yet. So there is that opening. The night shift, the seven sisters in Hindu mythology, the seven illnesses, chickenpox, smallpox, scarlatina, and what else is there? The rashes, the bad rashes. There's seven of these, and they do have a saying that there's seven sisters who bring these illnesses, and when they leave, if someone sees seven sisters leaving, then it's like the illnesses are leaving that city. This is what they believed, when they didn't know how people got smallpox, So you closed your house, or you said prayers and closed it, and nobody came in and nobody went out. But that's the best way to make sure that something that is contagious doesn't get through. But their idea was, we've said our prayers, we've closed the house. So the sisters, these seven sisters, I know in Hindu mythology, they are seen, they have a name. I can't remember now. But so I was playing on that. And this, again, thanks to my grandmother, she had this thing about seven, mud pots rolling down. And when I was a kid, that story traumatized me for a long time, So thinking that human beings were turned into these pots and rolling away. So again, I made use of it and made up this whole story about these sicknesses or illnesses or these contagious diseases leaving town altogether.
Yeah, I am actually tempted to read it. And there is such a big difference between superstition and supernatural. And I think our understanding of the two, and the placement of the two stories side by side, the night shift and the fried fish, is really interesting, because the night shift, it's very clearly, this is an experience of
Right,
warp of reality.
right.
And the fried fish, that's just like
Yes. Yes.
somebody taking advantage of superstition to get some fish.
Yeah. It was surprising what people in the villages do believe. They go out at night and they see somebody in white rushing away, and they'll come back. It could have been a woman who was trying to get home early, because it's late. They're trying to rush home, and they will come back and say, I've seen a ghost. And they'll be so scared that they will actually experience the sickness. And again, this has happened. Actually, why did I forget that? This happened in the family. My mother, when she was a 2-year-old kid, she got smallpox. They used to have smallpox during that time. It hadn't been exterminated is not the word. What is the term? That it hadn't been got rid of. And what she'd done was she was peeing, and then she kept pulling at my grandmother's sari. She says, those babies are watching me. Those babies are watching me. And grandma said, what babies? There are no babies. She said, look, they're there. They're watching me. Look at their eyes. And grandma just said, no, there are no babies. And my mother kept insisting. And then that night, she got high fever. And then when she got this very high fever, my grandmother remembered what she'd seen or claimed to have seen. And then she said, okay, this is serious. And, they didn't call the doctor in the middle of the night, but she called my grandpa, and they looked, and third day, the pox came out. So my mother still believes that was, there was some connection between seeing those two babies white babies looking at her and the smallpox, that was a form of the Hitalokka, I think it's called, the sister, one of the sisters, so two of the sisters maybe. So I don't know. I mean, I don't want to believe, but I don't know what she saw.
So should I read the night shift in that case to herald us into October and Halloween?
Oh yeah, that might work.
And,
Why not?
and leave you all in a haunted state for the long weekend? Okay.
Yes, please do.
I'll read till the end, but maybe I'll skip some parts for brevity
Right.
so that we have some space at the end. Okay, the night shift. Perched on the driver's seat of my hackney carriage, I watched ribbons of magenta and gold glint in the western horizon. The scorching heat of the day had given way to a soft breeze which flowed over me and played with my hair. There were few people about except for those trickling into Kalumia's tea stall in the middle of the town square, and the square was a good barometer of the social activity in the area, and thus I was parked right in front of the tea stall. And I had not really wanted to do the night shift, but there was no food at home, and the last meal I had taken was a cold breakfast of leftover rice and roasted red chilies. My hackney cab was the best in town, made of solid wood with a black paint veneer. It glinted in the morning sun and glistened in the moonlight. Inside, red velvet covers draped seats even royalty would not have hesitated to grace. My horses, Arab and Barab, had shiny coats and flowing manes, and why not? I fed them the best grass that was to be had, and every morning they grazed in Mullah's enclosure in the outskirts of Dhaka. And when I could not take them there, I cut the grass myself, and I still dripping with dew, and brought it home to them. My grandfather had bought Arab and Barab from another Gari one, who claimed his grandfather had got them from an Arab trader, and the horses were roast almond in color, and Arab's mane was a shade darker than the rest of his body, and as was his tail and patches of his legs, as if he had kneecaps and socks on. Barab had an even toe and a white diamond-shaped spot etched on her forehead. Dhaka is very different now from what it was 60 years ago when the story I'm about to tell you took place. Roads were not cluttered by buses and rickshaws, and few people owned cars. Gari ones ruled. The only other vehicles you could see were the occasional palanquins. That particular night was a quiet one. I had done a round of the main streets, but no one seemed in need of my services, and also it was Tuesday, a bad day for traveling, or so my grandma used to say. May she rest in peace. Kalumia's tea stall had always been a popular place. Even 6 months back, people crowded the tea stall as soon as the sun set, and as the evening deepened into night, friendly voices and carefree laughter could be heard streets away, and travelers would break their journey here, enticed by the smell of anise seeds bursting their flavor as Kalumia's wife deep-fried rice cakes in oil to serve with tea. Most days there were also golden pyramids of hot spicy boras sitting on the counter for people craving something more savory. Things had changed of late, however. It all started on the 1st of Falgun, when Bashunti's cry shattered the peace and tranquility of the town. Her 3-month-old baby died that day. He had been sick with fever for days, and when large blisters erupted all over the tiny body, there was nothing anyone could do. And a fortnight later, her 4-year-old daughter followed the same path, same symptoms, same result. Soon, other people in the neighborhood started displaying similar symptoms, and the dreaded disease, the disease that people feared so much that they avoided talking about it and certainly did not dare to mention it by name, preferring to call it Big Brother, a term of guarded respect. Big Brother had arrived. I'm going to skip a little bit. The clatter of teacups and saucers carried in the night like the tintabulation of bracelets around the ankles of new brides announcing their arrival, and the sound engulfed me. Goragari, are you free? The voice penetrated my lethargic state, and jerking to attention, I descended groggily from my perch. The door of the carriage had already been opened, and a lady dressed in a dark burqa glided in. I looked away, giving her some privacy, presuming her male companion would follow, and as she moved, I heard the tinkle of her anklets, and smiled to think I had mistaken that for the jangle of teacups. I marveled at the movement that produced such a titillating sound. Surely the wearer could not be but a beautiful young woman with ankles and legs to match. I sneaked a peek, but the dark night enveloped the burqa just as it, in turn, engulfed the woman. The horses, spirited by nature, started frigiding and snorting. I could see the tips of their ears perk up and exciting. What is it, my beauties? I'm here. You're safe. I spoke softly, and they understood me and they calmed down. Where to, sir? I asked, keeping my voice polite, turning around so the passengers could hear me. Just go west, said a female voice with a musical lilt in it. I was surprised to hear a woman's voice and wondered what was wrong with the male passenger, but held my tongue. If he didn't mind his women folk talking to strangers, what was it to me? Now the horses took off. The rein felt tight in my hands, and I had a moment of remorse that I had not taken Arab and Barab out for my exercise that morning. So he rides and he rides and he rides to the city, and he takes the carriage outside the city, and they're in the fields in a neighboring village, and he's starting to worry about the fact that he doesn't know what the rate is because he hasn't negotiated it, and he's starting to think that he's not going to get paid very well. We must have traveled in silence for another half an hour when the words Goragari turn left came floating up to me. It was the same chimerical voice. Though only 18, I'd been driving hackney cabs for 3 years since I left behind my mother in the village with my 2 younger siblings to join my father in town. He had been one of the earlier victims of Big Brother's wrath and passed away only 4 months back. I missed him terribly and whiled away hours by racing Arab and Barb to the city, exploring sights and scenes which, to the best of my knowledge, were alien to my father. I knew these roads like the folds of my pocket. There were no villages on this side for a long, long while. Were they trying to trick me out of my fare? But then why would they inconvenience themselves from me? And they just keep going. And they keep going. It was the night of the full moon, but clouds blanketed the sky, and not a single star dared to peep out. I could close my eyes for all the difference it would make. I let the horses direct me, and then he starts braying. And suddenly, out of the blue, Arab and Barb stopped in mid-flight, and had I not been so tense, I would have been jerked out of my seat. Barb gave a long and anxious whine, which Arab echoed, and expecting to hear a tirade from within the carriage, I waited, dragging deep breaths of the cool night air into my lungs. And without any warning, the landscape changed as if a gas light had been turned on. The full moon shone with an ominous glory, and I could see everything around me, even the diamond shape on Barb's forehead as she dithered beneath the reins. We were at the edge of a ravine, the Kola dump. I'd heard about it, but never ventured this far. There used to be a river there, but it had dried up long ago, and now the Dhaka municipality used it as a dumping site for the city's discarded dirt and grime. I'd heard passengers in my cab talk about strange happenings at the dump. One man claimed he had heard the cry of a newborn child one night. Another had seen a slender young woman slinking away. Arab and Barab had obviously lost their way, and I cursed myself for having allowed them to lead. Now the door was open, and one of the passengers was getting out of the carriage. It looked like the woman I had seen enter. Then another came out. She was dressed in a similar fashion, the same black burqa covering her from head to toe. And then another followed, and then another, and I counted 7 in all dressed identically. And the last one stopped, and slowly, very slowly, so slowly that time itself seemed to have been caught in a wrap, in a warp, turned. Her face was uncovered, and the moon was mirrored in it. I stood transfixed, and she was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. And for one moment her eyes looked into my very soul, and as just a glimpse, and a quiver sliced through my body, and then she turned away. And my eyes followed the figure as she joined the others at the edge of the ravine, and even as I watched, their amorphous cloaks started to expand, growing before my very eyes, till they looked like large round earthen pots, and the one closest to the ravine teetered on the brink and then slowly rolled down and was lost to sight, and the one next to her did the same, and then I lost sight of everything because I fainted. And then he comes to, and he jumps back in his garage, and he rushes back to the city, and he rushes back to his house, to his room by the stables, and he gets on his mat, and he covers himself with the kata that his mom made, and he tries to go to sleep, but he can't because he's so terrified. And he has a peer uncle, and he goes to the peer uncle, and he tells him what's happened, and he's also starving because he hasn't made any money, and he's very hungry and hasn't eaten in a very long time. And he's thinking of how to ask his uncle for money and ask him for help with dealing with this experience. And his uncle listened, and 5 minutes passed, and I flexed my shoulders, which had still not overcome the stiffness of the previous night. And finally he looked up, and he said, "So they've gone." He stood up and I could sense in his knees wobbling under the weight of his 85 years. Slowly he lumbered out of the living room into an inner one, and he was gone for quite some time, and I spent the time rehearsing phrases to ask for some money. And when he returned, he had a small bottle in his hand. "Sprinkle this water inside and outside your carriage. I've written down the words to a prayer. Say them over and over again. Do this till all the water has been used up." Now he goes, and he doubts it. He doubts the water. He's so hungry, and all he can think about is how much money he needs to feed himself. But then he decides to still do it, to still spray the water. And as he's doing it, he finds something. There was enough light now to see clearly. I had sprinkled 3 corners of the inside when I noticed something dark in the last corner. I went closer, and a strong smell of raw leather hit my nose. It was a pouch of some sort. Gingerly, with 2 fingers, I lifted it, and it was heavy, weighed down with whatever was inside. And then I heard the clink of metal. "Hibai, still not out with your carriage?" The voice caught me off guard, and I saw Motin, his head halfway through the window, smiling at me. He owned a little grocery around the corner. I smiled back, even as I placed the leather pouch under my gamcha. And I'll stop here. Or do you want? Okay, fine. I'll finish. I emptied the water into the corner and turned around, and Motin had left. The leather pouch wrapped in my gamcha, I casually walked into my room. Once inside, I checked that no one was about. I don't know what I expected, but with a bismillah, I tentatively pulled the string of the bag open. It gave way easily enough, and I peeped in. Something shiny caught my eyes. I bent closer for a better look, and a shiver pricked my whole body. Gold coins. I shut my eyes, then I opened them. I did this several times. The gold did not vanish, and I turned the bag upside down, and the pieces came clinking out. What a wonderful sound. Even better than the tinkling of anklets. I counted the pieces, 20 in all. I picked one up and bit into it. My teeth hurt. Solid gold. There were no new cases of smallpox from that day, and I finally understood what my peer uncle had said. They had gone. Isn't that scary?
Resonated very well. Like I could relate so much.
Yes,
And,
yeah.
Being a Bangladeshi woman, you just relate so much.
Yeah.
Because if I go back, the excerpt I read from Palki. So the exact same thing happened to me. Like, when this guy is asking the other person, like, what did you think of the food? So the day I got engaged, my parents invited my now who, like, is it being live casted on Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay. So okay, then I can tell. So they invited my in-laws, and they thought, like, only close family will come, but there were like what 30 three people, and like, all sorts of, like, second cousins and this relative and that business partner, everyone came. And you've been to my house, and like, we are three people, and we live in a, like, fairly we're happy with it. So there were a lot of people, and my parents, like, they tried their best. And then they came, and I was immediately, like, asked to put up a veil over my head because I didn't look like bride enough. And no one, like, they were like, nah, she doesn't look like a bride, she has to give a, like, put up the actual. And I was so uncomfortable, it kept falling down, and I kept keeping like, putting it up. And then, like, my parents did everything they could. Like, we are Puran Dhakayas, and like, Puran Dhakayas, they know how to throw a feast. Like, it's like, the saying goes, like, I'm not saying it, the saying goes like that. And then, like, after I get married, I, like, get to hear that's this the husband of one of my husband's cousin. So he said, like, he said on the day that I got engaged, like, oh, we had, like, so much high hopes that, like, we are getting our brother married into a Dhakaya family, they'll arrange so much food, but they didn't arrange any fish. I mean, what about the biryani that you had? What about the leg roast that you had? Like, you certainly had those and had your fun, but no, you have to complain because you didn't get any fish. So yeah, this is what happens, and like all the other stories.
When was the book published?
This was published in 2011.
And still ringing clear as day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we hope it will get a second edition. We can get it on the shelf of the library.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love that. I'd love that.
Well, I think we'll end for tonight. And also, you must be jet lagged and wanting to. No.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. But thank you again. Really appreciate the session, and I enjoyed having the stories read so well. And I forget your name, the one sitting next to you.
Oh, Zoa.
Zoa. And thank you for your, reflection. That's exactly how it is. Wedding, they'll always discuss the last wedding. That biryani was better. That one had this. It's amazing. You're eating it and you're discussing some other biryani. So thank you for that. All those, reminiscences.
Thank you.